Well, good morning, everybody. How we doing? Man, happy Memorial Day weekend. My name is Pastor Plex. So glad you guys are all joining us. And listen, hey, how many of you had loved ones or people who serve, or you served yourself and lost somebody in combat? I would just love to see a raising of your hands for that. Thank you so much just on their behalf for their service. It's a big deal, Memorial Day weekend. Sometimes people forget what it's about. Sometimes they think it's about veterans. It's actually about for those who gave their lives in service of our country. So grateful for that. All right, we're in a sermon series this month, and we're wrapping it up. And it was a three-parter, if you can't tell, with the give, save, live. And so we're talking about principles for how we should be stewarding our money. And that's probably a misnomer because it's not our money, it's God's money. And so how are we to steward the money that God has entrusted us? And I'm going to do a quick recap over the last two talks. You guys ready for the last two talks? In 5 minutes or less, somebody time me. Here we go. All right, so what we said is like the Bible is written in agrarian time. You guys remember this? So you think like you would have, your business would be your field, your crop of whatever that is on clip art, okay? And so you would say, how much am I to give of this crop to God? How much am I to give to the government? How much am I to save? And so the Bible actually laid that out. Back in the Old Testament, it said, bring the full tithe to the storehouse. And so when you hear that, you think 10%, bring the full 10%, but that's not actually what that meant. It meant bring all the different 10%. And there were several different 10% that the Bible commanded us to give. First off the bat was your first fruit, so the first bunch of grapes that came off the vine, you're supposed to send that over to the temple and all the Levites would take care of that for you, or your first donkey that was born from a particular donkey, that's what you would give. And then the first 10% of your crop would go during harvest time to make sure that the Levites were taken care of. The Levites were the people that were a tribe of Israel whose sole job was to minister before God and to the people, and so they didn't have land that they could do business on, or at least they shouldn't have. All right, and then secondly, you've got the next amount of money, about 13.33% was first, 10% was given to 3 national feasts, 3 pilgrimages to Jerusalem, which is sort of wild to think about, that 10% of the nation's GDP would go to parties. How awesome is that? And now that is how you know a nation has its priorities right. They would party with 10% of the GDP. And then every 3 years, they give 10% to provide for the poor and give it to the Levites to distribute among the poor. Okay, so that was the 3 different tithes. So in today's vernacular, when you say a tithe, what does that mean? And that's why we kind of go a different route with it. I'll explain that in a sec. Because on top of this, people are not supposed to glean all the way to the very edge. You'd only glean right up to about here, and you leave the margin for the poor. And before the days of I-35 and McDonald's, you would make sure that you did not glean everything so that the people would have something to eat off your field, and they would be, they do the best not to go beyond the margin to your private property, and that'd be weird. But you were to take care of the poor. Okay. So from there, past couple weeks, we said, listen, what that means is that there's going to be a certain percentage that we give, and there's another percentage, depending on what your tax bracket is, that you are commanded to owe, right? And what we say here is, when it comes to giving to the church, pick a percent. The reason why we say pick a percent is because we want this between you and God based upon the measure of faithfulness that God has given you to pick a percent. And the reason why it's a percent, that makes it intentional. Sometimes people come to church, and back in the day when there was plates that were passed and people had physical currency, you dump a 20 into the offering plate, and that assuaged all your guilt, which is great. But what we want you to do is really consider what God is calling you to give and be intentional about it with a percentage. Okay. Then pay your taxes. Okay. Then the next thing we talked about is, what about saving? And this is where depending on where you are on the Christian spectrum, if you're like an asceticist where you're like, I just buy all my clothes at the thrift store, then you're going to have a different view towards saving. But is it okay to have wealth? Well, Proverbs 13 seems to indicate that wealth is good. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, so don't do any get-rich-quick schemes, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. So save a little bit over time, and over time you will have wealth, and that's not a bad thing. Okay, then verse 22 of that same Proverbs, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So this is where if you have children and then you have grandchildren, I've benefited from the blessing of my grandfather. I've been blessed by my grandparents who've blessed me with an inheritance. That is something that I think about, and every time I'm in my house, I'm like, thank you, Grandpa Norb, for leaving me that inheritance. That is a very good thing. So you got to save for that. Okay, then Proverbs 21:20, precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. So there's this thing of like, you're going to have reserves so that when the AC goes out, and you guys know that your AC is not immortal. Does everyone know that? You live in Texas, it will go out. Now, I'll give you a 20-year lifespan, all right? But in 20 years, or in 10 years, or in 5 years, or it's going to break down. And so you've got to be saving little by little, putting some oil and treasure away to pay for that. Your car will not last forever, especially when you don't do oil changes, okay? Like that's a real thing for some people. So we got to take care of that thing and be thinking through, there could be a car accident. There could be something that happens in your life that goes negative, and you need to be prepared for that with money that you've saved. Okay. So then how much is always the great question, right? Proverbs 30, here's a great prayer. This is a prayer that probably very few of you are going to be like, man, I can't wait to pray that tonight. It's this, Proverbs 30, verse 8 and 9, give me neither poverty nor riches. Everyone's on board with like, God, please don't make me poor. I very rarely have said like, God, please, I can't handle money very well. Please don't make me rich. No one I've ever heard pray that. Feed me with the food that is needful for me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? And then on the flip side, lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. So in riches is where we forget about God because we, in a sense, become God. Because we use our money and our influence and our power and our prestige to influence things and make things happen. And then we feel really good about ourselves. And we have a tendency to think, I did that. That was my money, as opposed to God gave you the brain, God gave you the body, God gave you all the things that helped you to earn what you earn, and it's all his. And then on the flip side, this is where I love what the Lord says. When we trust in him, I've never seen a man of God begging for bread because he's been living for Jesus. Your needs are going to be taken care of. And we're going to see what he means by your needs. And sometimes that you might feel like, man, clothing and food, that's all I get. All right. And so I feel like there's a fear here for us that if I don't help God out, all I'm going to have is a thrift store outfit and a sandwich that someone handed me. And so I think that's where we struggle, is we all live in this perpetual fear. A lot of us live in this perpetual fear. That's where I'm going to end up. But then ultimately we come back to, is it okay for savings? And this is why I point out that even Jesus had savings, which is sort of weird to think about. He rolled around with Judas, who kept the money bag, and he put Judas in charge of the money bag, even though that he knew that Judas was helping himself and was very corrupt. And so I don't know what that says about that, other than Jesus rolled with a treasury, okay? And so that, for a person who could literally command rocks to become bread, for him to have an example of a money bag that was there with him means that there's something to that to provide for the needs of those that were in his close-knit family. Okay, so I want to kind of just see that you're going to be stuck or juxtaposed in between two views of like, save as much as I can and give it all away. And you should feel that tension. If you don't feel that tension leaving here today, I didn't do my job, okay? So I want you to feel that, because here's the thing. We can give with a wrong heart, and we can also save with a wrong heart. And God's not honored by either of those. Like you can, if your whole point of giving is you're like, look how awesome I am. Well, then there's a negative implication of that. And if you're saving with the wrong heart, saying like, I know that God won't come through, or he might come through, but it's just going to be for the bare minimum, I can't really trust him, then ultimately that's bad too, all right? So the hard part about giving and saving is you can't tell the person's heart. Only a person in God can determine that, all right? So I think there's this part of us that moves from greed to grace and back and forth over and over and over again. And I think what God's wanting us to do is live fully in grace. And I want to walk us through what that means, okay? So again, I think what happens for us is we tend to view money is either good or bad. And let's just go back to what Genesis says about material things, right? Because all money is something that's material that you traded for something else. But in Genesis, God created everything good. Work was good, things were good, material is good. And then money, which is just a tool. And this tool, this is my trusty hammer. I can use this to build, or Adrian rather, because she's really into building our bunny cages. And if I ever claimed that I built the bunny cages, that would not go over well. She built the bunny cages for her new home business of selling bunnies. And so she can build a cage with it. One day we're going to build a church building with a sweet hammer like this. But a hammer can also be used for evil. I don't know if you guys remember the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, her husband got attacked by David DePage in October of last year, literally with a hammer. Like this David just drilled him, gave him a skull fracture, he survived. But that was when the hammer, which is a tool, it's just a tool, was used for evil. It depends on whose hand the tool is in, if it's for good or for evil. And so I want us to sort of view that our wealth of what we're going to be living on is just a tool, and it can be used for God's glory or our own demise and ruin. All right, so that's where we're going this morning, and we're just going to sort of view that money is more than a tool when it becomes our love. And you know who really love money? And you're going to think this is sort of weird to say, but in general, those who have less money sort of lust after it. In general. I know some of you are just like, again, you live at the thrift store and you're minimalist and that's sort of your life. But for a lot of us, when you don't have something, you sort of look at what other people have. You look at their house, you look at their car, and you go like, how come I don't have a car like that? How come I don't have a house like that? How come I don't? And you sort of go through the how comes I don't. And that's when it's become your love. On the flip side, and this is where rich people tend to go, money becomes more than a tool, it becomes our hope. Here's what happens. What rich people will usually say, don't worry about it. I'll just move some money from here to there and things will be taken care of and we'll make it because we've got the savings. And what happens is your dependence on God slips away where you don't think about God. And you don't think like, oh, don't worry, God's going to take care of us. He's provided for. He's asked us to manage this. And I think that's where it becomes our hope. And so this morning, as we dig into really that juxtaposition between love and hope of money, of that right place where God calls us to be generous, ready to share, and able to see that our hope is in heaven, okay? That's where we're going this morning. We're going to be in 1 Timothy chapter 6. If you don't have a Bible, there should be a black hardback one somewhere in your vicinity. If you don't have a Bible at all, this is our gift to you. We love God's word, want everyone to copy it. If you have a digital one, those work just as well, but please use our Bible. We're going to pray and ask God to bless the reading and the proclamation of his word. Father, thank you for your word. God, I pray as we lean into this that people who sort of view themselves as perpetually poor would see how blessed they are. And that the things that they think that they want, they would see that actually propel a sort of ruin and a greed that could just darken their heart. And Father, I pray for those that have a lot, that they would have this sense of it's not theirs to build their own kingdom, but theirs responsibility to forward yours. And Jesus, you would be very much right in the middle of that as we're in this odd juxtaposition of something that you make good that's a tool that could be used for evil. We love you, God. We trust you with everything we are. In Jesus' name we pray. And everybody said, okay, here we go. 1 Timothy chapter 6, going to verse 6, just in case you aren't familiar. The Apostle Paul is writing to his pastoral protege, young Timothy, and he's sort of telling him sort of how to view the world and as a pastor, okay? And then he's going to say, like, listen, pastor, now there is great gain in godliness with contentment. So listen, live your life in a holy manner, but be content. And then he's going to kind of go back to a Job saying, like, naked I came into the world, naked I'll leave it. He says, for we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. Like, so, no matter how wealthy you are, and if you're clutching it as you die, someone's going to pry that money from your cold, dead fingers and put it somewhere else, right? Like, that's what's going to happen. You can't take it with you. But, and this is the part where people are like, man, that seems like a low bar. All right, but if we have food and clothing, with these, we will be content. Meaning, there's a part of you that wrestles with being content with less. Because you live in a world and it's all relative. I mean, everywhere you are on the planet, rich or poor is depending who's around you. Like depending, if you're living on Lake Travis, you might be the poorest guy in the neighborhood, but you're definitely richer than most, right? If you're living in Tanzania in the bush, you might still be richer than the other guys right down the street who are living in they have their house is made of mud. Yours has got some sticks in it, right? Like that's the part where it's like, it just depends on where you are, what rich means. All right, now, so he's going to lean into this. He's going to say, listen, I know there's some people, for those, you're going to talk to some people and they're going to want to be rich. For those who desire to be rich fall into temptation. Now, what does rich mean? It just means having more than the guy next to you. That's all that means. That's all it means. Because whatever your income bracket, you're either poor or rich depending on who's surrounding you. That's because it's an adjective that needs another person to describe it, right? For those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, okay? I'm looking at somebody, they have something, and I don't have it, and it becomes a snare, and they become hyper-focused into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. You know who usually go after get-rich-quick schemes? People who don't have money. You know who the lottery is designed to just totally just destroy? Is this like a secret? Is that a bad subject? People who don't have money play the lottery because they're hoping, man, maybe I can get it. Someone's got to win, right? Like we all go down that road. But what happens when you start, you start going like, man, if I could just, and you start talking like that, then what happens, you're not taking Proverbs 13:11, wealth gain little by little is good, but wealth gain hastily is going to be your ruin, and it's going to plunge people to ruin and destruction. Okay, why? For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evils. Now, money is not the root of all evils. It's the root of all kinds of evils. And it is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. So let's focus on that just for a second. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Now, I'm just going to pause here because I think this is where I want to just get some perspective. Now, maybe there are some of you I just love $20 bills. Just want to rub them up against my face, some Benjamins. But I don't think that's what it is. Although it is true that if you get like a stack of hundreds and you count it, it actually lowers your heart rate. It's wild. All right, anyway, look it up. Okay, so there is this thing. Maybe it is, counting cheddar, stacks of cash, you feeling good about it. But I don't think that's what it is. It's not the actual physical money itself. It's what money can buy you. And here's what money can buy. Money can buy some power. You can have influence in people's lives because of the amount of wealth you have. People look at you and they go, hey, person who has a lot more stuff than I do, what did you do to get that? And they'd say, well, just do what I do. As you see everybody on social media doing, like, do you want to have $10,000 a month without working ever? Come follow me, right? Like that's sort of like the promise of every person in a multi-level marketing is you'll never have to work. And anybody who's been in multi-level marketing knows that you work your rear end off all the time. That's just how that works. And so what I want you to see is that this is a lot of work, but it comes to this place of I want the power, okay? Or maybe it's not power for you. Maybe it's security. Like, I just want to not have to worry. Well, the Bible already tells you not to worry no matter your economic status. Don't worry. Why? Jesus got you. But what happens is we start to worry, and then the love of money is going to be the thing that gets us to security. I'm going to have enough, and I won't have to worry about running out of money, which is why are you guys following the federal debt ceiling thing this week? Okay, so there are people on Social Security, they're like, if I don't have any money, then I am ruined. I am going to not make it. And what's happened, watch this, their hope has been put on money and the government, which is always dangerous. And then what happens is you want to take your hope from government to Jesus, right? That's where our hope is best met. Okay, so power or security, or what about this? Approval. Like when you are the one that's the person buying for everybody, like drinks on me, like the entire bar loves you, right? For that night, you are the king or the queen. It's good living. But as soon as the money runs out, then in general, people go, okay, moving on. Like, thanks for whatever that you got me that one time. And so there's this desire, this lust for, this love of, if I could just have the money, I could have the approval. Then people will finally like me. I'll finally get a girlfriend. Like, I think there's a lot of people that can sit in that boat. Okay, or what about this last one? control, right? Like when you have the money, then you can dictate who does what and where it's done. And so that becomes like, I just want things, I want the way the country is run, I want the way the community is run, I have a lot of money, I have a lot of wealth, I want things to go my way. And so you view money as your way to get what you want. Okay, so that's how that happens. That's how the love of money becomes the root of all kinds of different evils. It just feeds on different aspects of our sin nature that's already there. Watch this. You guys know that if money is just a tool, all it does is amplify what you already have. So if I'm a great craftsman, if I am Jeff Mitchell, I can take a hammer and it becomes like an art brush. If you're Chris Pleckenpole, a hammer is, it might be able to nail a nail in and it's kind of crooked and I use the back end of it. What are these things called? The claw part, thank you. And I'm usually more the claw part, right? Or this is a better demo tool to break down a wall and then ask Jeff to rebuild it for me. That's kind of like so it just depends on whose hand that the tool is in, is how efficient, how well it will be used. And if it's gonna be something that's gonna build up cathedrals or murder people, that becomes the telltale if it's good or evil. All right, okay. So I think that's the part where we need to sort of wrestle with. And this happens all the time in our culture or beyond. This is something that plagues the world, this love of money. You guys heard the Tinder swindler? You guys heard this? You can watch it on Netflix, it's wild. Okay, here's the story. This guy from Israel is named Shimon, which is another way of saying Simon, by the way. And so Shimon is he is this classic con man. You guys ever watch the old shows or as a con man and solving who the con man was, all these women getting grifted? I thought that was just something made up in shows, but this literally happened in the past couple of years. This guy named Shimon would be on Tinder and he would his profile pic would be him in his jet being like, and like women would be like, oh, there's a guy at the jet. He must be a really great guy. And so then they would they would Tinder message and they would meet up and he would pick them up in Sweden, fly them to Paris. They would, he'd wine and dine them and they were just like fall in love and he'd tell them all the sweet nothings that you're supposed to say and they were just like, whoa, he's amazing. Finally, my knight in shining armor, he said everything I wanted to hear. And they're picking up on nothing because you're just like, really? That does not happen. Okay, anyway, so then what happens is like they get a text message or a phone call through an encrypted server thing and says, hey, I need $100,000 real quick because he's a diamond broker and the Russian mafia is trying to take him out for his diamond collection. And so, of course, the woman who's in love with her lover of all loves that she's met once sends him $100,000. Because that makes sense. And then he takes that and he goes and spends it on the next woman who he's flying on a jet with to the next town. And he tries not to do the same restaurant twice. That's just tacky. And so that's what happens over and over. And $10 million later, he gets caught. And you got to ask yourself, what's the end game there? Like you got to think at some point you're like, this is not going to go well for me. I thought this would be a good time at first, but then once you get the thing going and you get a standard of living that's been raised and you're used to working out at, like where you have personal trainers and personal towels, and then you can't go back to the regular gym because just who could do that? Like there's a reality of like you've now elevated your standard of living where you can't go back. And so you got to keep it up. And that's exhausting. And on the flip side, all these ladies, just like, I know none of us in here would ever be swindled like that because we're way too smart and, because we're amazing. But at some point when someone is promising the world and the red flag goes up, you go, really? And you do a cursory Google search and, it checks out. Like, I think there's this part of you that says, I'm willfully ignorant because I don't want reality to hit me. That's just for free in your dating relationships. Okay, keep moving. So watch. I think this is where we then, so that's the poor man. And everybody has a sense of being poor, not having enough. Because it was these wealthy people that gave hundreds of thousands of dollars, their entire life savings, they gave it to this guy for a promise of what? More. Now watch. Go to verse 17. So he's going to shift from talking to those who want money to those who already have it. These are the ones that already have it in comparison to the people that live next door. Okay, just a reminder. Rich is always an adjective that needs another person. As for the rich in this present age. Okay, so man, hammer them. Get them, Paul. Tell them. All right, charge them not. Command them. Tell them the rules. Don't be haughty, which is an SAT word for arrogant. Don't be a jerk. Here's why you have to command rich people to do this, because a rich person at some point probably was really smart. They made some good investment decisions. They didn't lose all their money. They didn't eat everything in front of them. So they made something wise. And so what happens, you can sometimes mistake a good decision in one area and then falsely assume that you know stuff about something else. And that makes you very know-it-all-y and not fun to be around. You guys know these people? Like they're the type of person who they always go back to, well, back when I made that one decision. And so then parenting, they don't even have kids and they're giving me parenting advice because of that one thing they did. It's very irritating. They take their dog, well, this is how I do with my dog. It's pretty much the same thing with kids. Okay, it's Austin, so that happens. All right, so don't be haughty, don't be arrogant, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches. Remember, this is what we said. This is what rich people do. They tend to go like, I'm good, I've got my money. I've already got my money. I don't need to worry. As opposed to, my hope is in God. Because God can make your money disappear just like that as quickly as he can make it appear. All right. And then this is the interesting thing that's sort of going to shock people, because there's a part where if you consider yourself like not rich, you go, yeah, tell them. And then this is where Paul's going to say this, watch. Put their hopes not on riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. Wait a minute. I mean, rich people can enjoy themselves? They should be miserable with their riches. And what I've known some rich people, they're not miserable. They're actually enjoying a lot of their money. It's actually really great. And what he says here is, look at this. They richly were given. To which you're like, well, why? What? And this is where, if you don't have money, you don't want to envy it because you don't want to judge another man's servant. This is Romans 12:3. With whatever measure of faith God has given you, live in it. Don't sit there and go like, whoa, you've got too much money. Because there's that judgy judgerson in you that comes out whenever you're seeing somebody with a car they probably couldn't afford, and you want to make sure they know that they made a bad decision. It's just in you, right? And so I want us to see that God calls us to enjoy material things because they're just tools. And you can enjoy it, but it's when it turns to your worship or your hope, that's where it becomes darkness. All right, now watch the last bit of this. So rich people, they are to do good. All right, okay, do good things. And to be rich in good work. So add to your wealth that you have on earth, wealth in heaven by doing good works, which are like, sweet, I'll serve in children's ministry. Yes, and I'm going to be generous and ready to share. So this is like, I want you to be ready to share with your family. I want you to be ready to share with your friends. I want you to be praying for opportunities for God to bless you in a way to give somebody something. Isn't that a cool thing to experience? Being able to give somebody something because the Lord lays it on your heart, or that there's a need in the church or a need in the family, and you can come through for them as God has called you to do. Be generous. Thus, and this is the part where Jesus ties in here, thus storing up treasure for themselves, a good foundation for the future. The future. Everybody saves for the future. And when you are generous and you are ready to share, what happens is you lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven. To which, this is where non-religious people go, well, that's how the con works. You just sort of keep pitching the heaven thing, people buy into it, that makes sense. No. See, when you give and when you're generous, it does two things. One, nobody likes a greedy person. Two, nobody knows they're greedy. Like, I mean, a lot of people are like, Chris, I'm really struggling with porn. I'm really struggling with my marriage. I'm really struggling with my job of a jerk of a boss, blah, blah. Usually that's where people come to me. No one goes like, man, I'm really struggling with greed. I've just got way too much money. I send way too much money to myself, and I just don't know what to do. Because the problem with that is the answer is really easy. Okay, give it away. But when you give it away, you make yourself more enjoyable of a person here on this planet, but then you make your life in the future, you put your hope there. That's why you lay a good foundation for the future. Your hope, your heart follows your treasure. So that they may take hold of that which is truly life. Rich people, you take hold of what is truly life by sending it ahead and have an anticipation of enjoying the goodness of God and the freedom of God in an eternal home. Which you're like, okay, Yes. In other words, God's people are to put their hope in God, not in riches. How do you do it? You've got to be generous and ready to share. You got to be generous in good works. Okay. And what I wanted to do this morning, because I feel like I want us to kind of talk about how, because rich people, the tendency is that we make ourselves gods or the money a god, right? That's where we can go. And I wanted to bring up the elders of our church up here. So guys, come on up to sort of share you guys can clap for elders. That's good, yeah. And there we go. And elder does mean old person, right? But it also means wise, godly man of God, all right? So there you go. These are all the old people of the church. I'm kidding. An elder, if you're not familiar with that term, it's just our church's term for leadership, that these are the ones that God has bestowed the leadership, and we all serve as a plurality of elders, which means we all sit around and try to make decisions together. And if you think that's hard in your own home, think about getting 5 guys together trying to make any decisions. It's definitely a God, Holy Spirit inspired moment. And we usually come all on the same page on a lot of stuff. So that tells you that Jesus is here. All right, so I wanted to kind of walk through some questions. First off, I'm going to introduce you, and then you are going to then answer a question. So you guys ready for this? I know, you should be nervous. Craig, if you're not familiar with Craig is our elder liaison to our finance committee. So Dave Sheffield chairs our finance committee, and he goes through the books line by line. So if you're ever wondering, are we above board? Yes, we are. Just ask Dave. And then Craig tells us what Dave said. So it works out. So
that's true. That is true.
So Craig, can you tell us, just from the church finances to your own finances, tell us how do you keep track of your personal budget? And is that something you've always done?
Not something I've always done, but since 2006, when I took my first Financial Peace University class.
Oh, that's a hint to something.
Financial Peace University.
Are we having a class coming up?
Why, yes, Chris. Yes, we are. Thank you for asking. So starting on June 6th at 7 p.m., we will be having our church-wide Financial Peace University. So if you're interested, you can find out more about that on the website through the events page, or find myself or Dave Sheffield, who will be co-leading with my wife and I through the 9-week course. And so one of the things that we learned was how to do a monthly budget, being very intentional with our money, and we did that through spreadsheets. And I love a good spreadsheet. You can ask these guys. I'll show up with a spreadsheet to about every meeting.
Craig,
it's a beautiful thing.
Spreadsheets make a lot of people eyes glaze over. So what about those people that aren't spreadsheet Excel people?
I don't understand the question. But no, when I started saying spreadsheet and managing and actually moving money around and being intentional with that, if that gives you like a nausea in the pit of your stomach or your temples starting to pound a little bit, they have some wonderful budget apps now that you can track your budget. It's very easy. Matter of fact, Tara and I are now moving away from spreadsheets and into Every Dollar with Ramsey Financial, but there are a number of them out there. Some of your banks will have some of those too, so you can very easily track and be intentional with your money and figure out where things are going.
That's awesome. What about, let's just talk on something really practical. If I have debt, should I be giving to the church or being generous?
Yes. No, in all honesty, when we have abundance, it's very easy to give out of abundance, and it's very easy to obey the commands, that we're commanded to give and to tithe. It's when you're in debt is when you really have to be intentional with your money, have a budget, because yes, you should give. You shouldn't give so much that you send yourself further into debt. But at the same time, you have to show, be obedient to what it says, in Malachi, as Chris preached a couple of weeks ago, about test me in this. This is one area where God said, test me. And so how that looked in Tara and I's life, for the first 8 years we were married, one or both of us were in college. So once we finally got our first real job, we had thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of not only debt and student loans, but credit card debt to the tune of about $80,000. And so we ended up with a debt consolidation counselor. So we went to that meeting, and so in that first meeting, he was looking at here's where we spend our money. He's like, oh, here's an area. You guys can quit tithing for a while and put that money towards debt, and you guys get your debt paid down, then you can go back to giving. And Tara and I, with a resounding no, and he even backed up from the table, said, no, we're not going to do that. So we felt that we needed to honor God in our commitment, and where our treasure was, we wanted to show that. And so we felt that God has honored that all throughout our marriage since that point forward.
And are you out of debt now?
I am. We are out of debt. Sorry, Tara. We are out of debt other than a little bit on our mortgage.
Nice. Okay, so Wesley, we know that Craig's always perfect in his finances. Tell us about some mistakes that you have made in your finances.
Well, the biggest one is to be out of debt and then go back into debt and then come back out again. So, but I'll tell you about one. Giving report usually comes out during tax season, first of the year kind of thing. And this particular year, about 15 years ago, I had it come out, had not looked at any of my tax records, and it's like, babe, come here. Call my wife, and we're looking at it. You know, we gave this much. What's this mean for what we actually made? I literally did not know how much I'd kind of, brought in that particular year. The challenge of it was that the giving wasn't matching what I was seeing in the church, in our home, and I'm like, where did it all go? And that was a huge mistake, and so we had to buckle down and make some decisions and have some revealing moments, essentially, that showed that my heart was not in the right place when it came to giving. It was driven, quite frankly, by lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. Showed up in the pride of life, and that I can bless the church, and unwillingly it became something of, I was in control of operations because I was giving so much. And I didn't necessarily seek that, but that's how it ended up. And it revealed something about my heart.
All right, so as one who went in and out of debt, how can a person control impulsive spending and maybe curb unnecessary expenses? Like, how do you wrestle with that?
Phew, okay. I'm on a timer here. All right. The biggest approach, I think, is to treat it like sin. I know my weaknesses. I know my temptations. I know there are things that I run into that will seduce me, as it were, right? If I allow myself to be around it. So what do I do? What do I do to counter it? I have to have accountability, right?
All right. Okay, that's good. Accountability. I love that. Robert, talk to me about, let's say you're not exactly a mathematician, and it comes to the finances and budgeting. How do you decide who does the finances, and especially in your case where for 10 years you were a part of that? So talk us through that.
Yeah, so when we got married, I was not a believer, Debbie was, and so from my perspective, as long as the bills are being paid, we had enough money, I was good. And so I come to faith 10 years into our marriage, and now this whole idea of the fact that I need to be leader of the family. So I began to grow in that and understand that although Debbie has always done the bookkeeping part, even to this day, I am now, over the years, have been initiating time where her and I get together, we review our budget, our giving, our spending, our saving, all that stuff. And so now I'm engaged in what's going on through prayer and discussion with her. When an opportunity comes up to give to someone in need, now her and I get together, we talk about it, we pray about it. And something I didn't share earlier is it's amazing over the years how we have grown and understood the biblical concept of money. Now, her and I were rarely ever in disagreement with what to do regarding the giving of money. And the grip we have on money is loosened up more and more.
So you got functional kids that are living pretty good lives. And it's awesome. And that's not the case for a lot of people. How did you teach your children about money and instill in them good financial habits so that they could be functional adults?
Okay, so about when our kids were 8, when they turned 8, we started an allowance for them. At that point, we taught them that they needed to give a percentage of that to God, so they would give faithfully to God into the church through that, and then we gave them chores to do. So they had to kind of work for that money. And so then in family devotions on Sunday evenings, we would have topics regarding money. We'd engage them in conversations Debbie and I would have regarding big purchases and even little purchases. I remember in around 2001, we had a building campaign at Hill Country Bible, and we all as a family gathered on Sunday evening and we prayed through and discussed what we would all give. And Ryan and Christine were a part of that. Yeah. And so we committed to pledge. For the 3 years, we all faithfully gave to that, completed it. And so to this day, both families, Christine and Ryan's family, are giving faithfully to the Revived Stones.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so, and then also too, something that is somewhat small, but it was, I think, impactful, is when we'd go on vacation, we would give them a sum of money they could spend, like if we went to the Grand Canyon, and they could only spend that amount of money for what they wanted, and that was it. So it forced them to kind of manage and understand the value of money and be disciplined in the spending of it.
Oh, that's beautiful. All right, Brad, I'm going to move to you. What was a time that God came through for you in your finances where you took a big risk?
Yeah, there was a time that we had just a whole lot of bills come in, and we were sitting there. We had a roof that needed to be replaced, and I think we did have the AC go out. And we were sitting there, we were expecting, we had just bought this house, and we were supposed to get some money out of it to pay for the new roof, and it didn't happen. And there was a real temptation where we just won't, tithe. Boy, look how this money goes out to tithe and offerings. Do we really need to do this? We're going to do it. And sure enough, there was some expense or something like that at work that came through. I forget what it was, but it was the exact amount. And it was one of those times where I just sat there and thought, boy, this is really God providing for us. Actually, Julie saw it long before I did. I'm sitting there just amazed, but she said, this is from God, and she was absolutely right.
Wow, that's wild. So, Brad, when you think about that, if people are saying, like, well, what should I give? If it's not 10%, what percent is it? Or is it a percent? I don't know. Walk us through, it being intentional with giving.
Yeah. I would, 10% is a good number, but it's a number. Mm-hmm. What we need to do with your giving is like everything else in your life. You need to see what God's will is for that, okay? Because if you're sitting there trying to just do it on your own, you're probably going to come in lower than you should. But if you sit there and you honestly seek God's will for you in this area, He will provide. But the other thing I would say too is it should never be static. You should always be sitting there thinking, how else can I give more money to God? What are those things in my life? God, what are you telling me this year? What are you telling me this month? I got some additional money coming in from something, or maybe I was going to have to get my car fixed. It didn't cost as much, and now I've got some additional money. What can I do with that? And I think that the important thing is, you can get hung up on the percentage and everything, but it's like every other area of our life. How can I be obedient to God in this area? We treat money so different than every other area of our lives, but that obedience to God needs to apply to our money just as it does everything else in our life.
All right, Craig, one more time. Where do I sign up for this class?
Oh, well, it is, you go to the events page. You can click on Financial Peace University. There'll be a link there if you need childcare. We are going to offer childcare. If you're going to miss a week, that is fine. All the lessons are online, and we can talk about it after the next class. Going through the summer, we realize that may be the case, but yeah, it is there. Or you can find myself or Dave Sheffield after service today, and we will happily walk you to the sign up.
Man, thank you.
Let me just jump in here real quick. For those of you with kids, if you want to give your child a gift, send them to Financial Peace University. Our eldest son graduated college in 2008. If you remember, nobody was hiring, and he's sitting there just absolutely out of his mind. What am I going to do? My wife decided to bribe him, we weren't above that, to go through Financial Peace. And so he went through it. And to this day, he says that has had the most impact of anything he ever learned in college. He said, I never learned any of this stuff in business school about how to handle my own finances. So if you need to go to it, that's great. But if you've got young kids who are getting ready to head out into the world and you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, are they ready? Give them the gift of understanding how to handle money in a godly fashion. Man, thanks, Brad. Okay, hey, we'll give it up for our elders. Appreciate you guys. Now listen, ultimately the question comes of this: how will you be rich? And everybody wants to be rich, so you might as well learn how to do it so that when you become rich, you don't have a high learning curve and then fall into ruin. So let's learn how to be rich.
if you're a Christian, then this is what God's call you to do, to steward his wealth well. If you're not a Christian, then this is a bunch of blah, blah, blah about money. And it makes no sense, because the very first thing that we tell you to do here is give the first percentage away. And so if you're not a Christian, that should sound weird to you. Okay, that should sound weird. And maybe you're like, well, at least that alleviates greed. I'm down with that, fine. But the reason why we give, and one of the things that I love to do with my son is I've shown him how much we give. He's like, why do we give so much? And I say, because, son, there was a time when Daddy wasn't a very good person. And I made a lot of bad decisions. And God so gave to me his only son, Jesus. And when I put my faith in him, it just changed everything. And so the very first of everything I want to do is to honor the one who saved me, who brought me out of the darkness of my own sin and the frustration, the lostness of confusion of life. And that's why. And so there's this emotional component for me that comes in every time my children ask me about that. And it becomes this unbelievable blessing to instill in them a generation of people that are going to be generous because of what Jesus in his generosity did for us. So if you're not a Christian, I want you to know that God so loves you that he gave his one and only son, Jesus, who died on the cross for your sin. And he rose from the dead so you don't stay dead. You are instantly transported to be with Jesus when you die. Isn't that great news? And so because if that seems so weird, I want you to do something for me. I would love to talk to you about this. If you want to receive Jesus as your Savior, just text Jesus and I will follow up with you. And I would love, if some of you are out here, I would love for you to be praying for the people who need to follow up. Just pray for them and just say, like, your response of Jesus, that doesn't save you. That starts the conversation where we go like, hey, I want you to take that leap of faith and trust and follow Jesus with your whole heart. In fact, this morning, we're going to be baptizing Charlie. Charlie's one of our teenagers. I've been tracking with Charlie's life for a bunch of years, and God has brought him from death to life, and we want to celebrate that so excitedly. So as you watch his video, maybe there's a part of you that says, like, I want that same salvation and hope. So let's pray and ask God during this time that it might be your turn to trust in Christ for your salvation. Lord, thank you.